The main sleep tips. Well, one is don't eat 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. It is like your liver set at whatever, 8 or 9 o'clock, just clocks out and says, I know there's work piling up, but I'm going home.
Welcome back to Body Signals. First, I'm thrilled to have our co-host, Alyssa Wilson, back. I wore a Florida Gators shirt in her honor. Alyssa, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. So glad to be back.
Yes, and we've got a special guest. Our guest is Karen Kennedy. She has an MS in nutrition, is board certified with the Integrative and Functional Nutrition Academy. She's a certified nutritionist in the state of Washington and also a certified National Diabetes Prevention Program lifestyle coach. Karen, welcome to Body Signals.
Thanks, Bill. Good to see you, Lisa.
Good to see you too. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we are so excited to talk to you about CGMs because, as I understand it, you use CGMs a lot in your practice. And of course, Signos is all about CGMs and glucose data. But before we start, I have a question I love to ask nutritionists and dietitians. And it's what happens to a nutritionist and dietitian in a social setting when someone invites you over to their house for dinner. Do you find that they hide all of their foods? Well, I'm not allowed to say good and bad foods anymore, but they're sometimes foods. Do you find that they clean up their pantry or maybe make the menu a little bit healthier than they would if you weren't a nutritionist?
I think people just don't invite me over for dinner as much because of that.
Yeah.
But, it's funny you should bring this up today because I like having people over for dinner, and I take the approach, give the people what they want in social situations. But one of my favorite holiday, festive, bring people together meals is a fondue party. And so we're having some good friends over tonight, actually, for fondue. My husband is Swiss, and I love making a big pot of fondue with the crusty white bread and vegetables, potatoes to dip into it with a big salad and wine.
So you're going to sneak your vegetables in terms of the carrots and other things?
I actually do sneak a fair bit of vegetables into fondue, and then I have a great fondue soup that I make if there's any leftover cheese and vegetables and potatoes. It all becomes a big soup the next day.
And maybe even a glass of wine to get those polyphenols in, which
that's
we'll
right.
talk about.
So I like to set this precedent that dinner parties are for fun and we don't. Yeah.
We're not the food police.
I'm not
right?
the food police, unless you're paying me.
Okay, that's a little scary. So, holiday meals, having people over, to me, that's stressful. And I've noticed something with my glucose data. That when I get stressed, like for some reason, even though we've done a lot of these episodes of Body Signals, I always get like a little bit stressed before starting a recording. And I'm looking at my glucose right now, which is starting to ramp up. And I know that you are telling us, you too, Alyssa especially, she gets even more nervous than I do.
I always get nervous. I can see it in the data right now.
Yes, it's so amazing. But question we had for you, we talked about this when we did our pre-interview. You've noticed a connection between stress and glucose. I wonder how you handle that with your clients.
Yeah. I think, we're all wired so differently. And I think I even remember a long time ago reading a paper on rats and their stress responses. And then when you get in the laboratory, you'll get purebred animals for research studies. And certain varieties of rats were much quicker to go on alert. Their nervous system was geared to be on alert and to react in a very stressful manner. And other rats, you could open the door and surprise them, and they'd be like, whoa, dude, hey, what's going on? They're just much more chill. And I see that in a similarity in glucose response, that some people, either because of the way they're genetically wired or because of past experiences and trauma, some people's stress responses are more extreme. And some people's glucose response to stress more extremely than others.
So do you find that for some of your clients, that's not a problem. Maybe you have a set of clients that do get stressed, but you're not seeing it in their glucose data where others get stressed and you do.
Yes,
Well, that's
100%.
fascinating.
For example, one of the groups I was doing a while back, one of the people in it, I'm thinking specifically, is a doctor, and he said I was looking at his glucose data, and I said, well, that's a good day. Look at that day. Your glucose levels look good. Tell me about that day. And he said, that was a really stressful day. I was on the go all day long. But as a result, he wasn't snacking and things, and his blood sugar looked good. Where I have other people who, when I look at their diet, without the glucose meter, when I look at their diet, it looks really good. And I would predict that based on their diet, that they would have really good glucose control. But they don't, because their baseline levels of glucose are elevated, and they just can't get it down below like 115. And we come to find, after a little bit of asking what's going on, that they have a lot of stress in their lives. And that stress, despite having a very good diet appropriate for blood sugar, their stress is what's keeping their blood sugar levels high.
Wow. I'm going to devote a whole series of episodes to this topic of stress and glucose, because it does come up a lot with our members in our Facebook group. But I wonder, from your practice, are there certain stress mitigation techniques that you recommend? And I would love for you to tell us about like what you found works the best to help people that have that stress glucose connection keep their stress and as a result their glucose down.
Yeah. It depends. It has to fit into their life and address their stress triggers. But the first thing that comes to mind when you ask me about a specific technique is one of the women who falls into this category of that her baseline is always kind of around 115, and her meals they don't cause that much of a deviation in glucose levels. But we know that stress is a big thing for her. So she was wearing a CGM, and I recommended to her that she try a relaxation practice after work, because her work is really stressful, and so, in the afternoons, why don't you do this one stress reduction exercise that I like? And it's a yoga pose. It's called, in the yoga terminology, it's called Viparata Karina, which is basically putting your legs up the wall, elevating the pelvis, elevating the legs, putting an eye pillow over, and setting a timer for 10 minutes.
Just so we can draw the image for our listeners, we also have some videos coming up on YouTube, and for that, maybe I'll actually throw up a diagram of this. But are we talking about your butt's up against the wall with your legs straight up, or are you elevating your hip as well?
Your butt's up against the wall, and the butt is elevated just a little bit, which actually will take me to the next point.
With a cushion, or are you are you just
a cushion?
Okay, got it.
Like 3 or 4 inches.
Okay, interesting.
Pelvis is up a little bit, legs are elevated, but the biggest part for relaxation is, of course, just laying there for literally 10 minutes. And I can't remember the exact number, but she showed us, and during that process, her blood sugar dropped about 20 points.
Wow. Yeah. I can relate to this client because I've noticed, like, after wearing the CGM, and like periods of very stressful times for me, my glucose is elevated, and like I'm eating my, like my healthy meals, and it's just like my baseline is higher, and I can feel the stress, and it's hard for me to bring that down. And I'm not seeing a huge change in glucose from my meals, but just getting that baseline lower is difficult. So that is something I may have to try.
Yeah, I encourage all of our members to try that. And again, what was the name of that yoga pose, just in case people want to look it up?
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's Viparata Karina, Viparita Karini.
And your suggestion is for how long again?
10 minutes.
Just 10 minutes. And do that at what point in the day?
After work, as that the transition time between the busy time to the more relaxed time. So either before dinner or after dinner. And I've been recommending this specific practice for years, And in fact, I remember a group I was doing around 2020 online. It was a group, we were trying to improve sleep, strategies to improve sleep. And doing that in the afternoon, evening time was one practice that actually helped improve people's sleep. And I thought, because I also noticed it helps people with binge eating, all the things that come with that stress and kind of stressy feeling in the evening. But then in another, in that same group, I had a doctor he's a nephrologist, works with people with kidney issues. And he's a hospitalist, so he's up on his feet all day. And his input, he tried that, and he noticed that he usually has to get up and use the bathroom a couple of times a night. And of course thought, well, that's age for you. But he found he didn't have to as much when he did that. And he realized that what it was the fluid was collecting in people's legs, his legs. And the first time you actually level out that so that you can get the venous return of all that fluid back to your kidneys and excrete it, the first time that happens for most people is usually bedtime. But by doing it in the afternoon or mid-evening, it gives your body a chance to get that fluid out so you don't have to wake up and pee in the middle of the night.
And it might have a profound effect on those people like your client who are up on their feet all day. I imagine that's the ones that are really going to get the benefit. But I think maybe we can all get the benefit of this. It's so interesting you mentioned that. I've changed my stress reduction practices based on one of our experiments. We actually noticed anecdotally, we had a very small experiment where we're just testing oatmeals, and our VP of product had two very different responses to the same bowl of oatmeal. One, she was relaxed. I think her husband was dropping their kid off, and then the next day she was had to get her kid ready for daycare, and she noticed a really dramatic response in her glucose because she was so stressed. So now I've changed my my meditation practice to do my meditations right before meals, because I'm thinking maybe that will help reduce any stress-related spikes to the meal if I can get my my body to relax a little bit before eating.
And how's that working for you?
It's working. It's working, and I noticed that it's actually more pleasurable to eat relaxed than stressed. You enjoy your meal more when you're relaxed. So I found that that's been, if nothing else, I'm getting a quality of life benefit from doing that. And it's nothing more than like just 10 minutes of meditation before each meal.
Nice.
Yeah. You mentioned. Oh, go ahead.
Different. Yeah, I mean, just it increases satisfaction with your meal too. You enjoy it more. You get to like eat in that rest and digest mode. Your body can properly digest and absorb what you're eating, instead of eating in that stressful state where a lot of the times that we're done with the meal and we don't even realize we've eaten, So that's something that is a great tip, for our listeners, to just really try and eat in that rest and digest mode and sit down, eat slowly, chew your food thoroughly, and enjoy the meal, most importantly.
That's actually the second most common piece of stress reduction advice, because I don't like to say, you just need to reduce your stress, because that's just as annoying a thing to say or hear as, you just need to lose weight. You just need to reduce your stress. So it's nice to give people actual things. And because a lot of my clients, they don't just have blood sugar issues, there's some digestive things because we're stressed, I'll give them a really solid recommendation to do something like box breathing or the 4-7-8 breathing for 5 to 10 rounds before a meal. Because as you know, what is it that, you can actually reduce the blood flow and your ability to digest food by about 50% by being stressed. So you can use some of these breathing practices that, that no one knows you're doing it. You could just be sitting there, doing, 5 rounds of normal breathing, and start reducing your stress levels, shifting into that parasympathetic rest and digest mode that Alyssa was talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put some links to those breathing techniques. I know there's some good YouTube videos that cover box breathing.
Yeah.
And a couple of other of the top breathing techniques, but another great way to just quickly reduce stress.
Yeah.
You mentioned sleep, and I know Alyssa had a question about sleep and glucose.
Yeah, I mean, this may be one of the main topics that our members notice when they first put on the CGM, or one of the big trends that they're looking at is what's going on during their sleep. And I would just love to know, in your experience when it comes to glucose, is it that poor glucose dysregulation leads to poor sleep, or is it that poor sleep is leading to poor glucose dysregulation during the day?
Yeah.
What are you noticing with your
The
with
answer
your
is yes.
We were afraid you were going to say that. We're going to force you to pick which one is the more impactful of the two.
Which one is it?
I even told Alyssa, don't let her say 50-50 or something like yes.
I'm glad I knew it because, yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
And what are your clients, what are they seeing in their data overnight?
Yeah.
And during the day from poor sleep?
So I'd like to actually, I'd like to discuss the yes, because one of the first things we noticed when doing groups, like doing, groups of like 10, 15 people at a time through like using a CGM and just seeing what helps, seeing what doesn't, and gradually tightening their blood sugar levels up is, in a group that size, at least 3 people would say, usually more, would say, I am sleeping so much better now. And we hadn't even got to the place where I was talking about sleep and how to improve your sleep. I'm sleeping so much better now. And these were people who didn't have diabetes. They just had, their glucose there was a wider range. Their glucose levels were going up more with meals, like more up to 180. And now they were keeping it under 140. It was a little more even. They were eating more protein. And I think what we were finding is exactly how much stress erratic glucose levels causes your body. Because that
higher variability.
Yeah, higher variability. Thank you. And that having that all day is kind of like adding a little extra stressor, here's another little shot of adrenaline. Here's another school run. Here, get another child ready for school for daycare. And we know that the more of those we have, we get to the end of the day and sleep is harder because usually our afternoon cortisol level is higher. So that glucose dysregulation does disrupt sleep. And they had the instruction to pull back their evening meal. Don't eat 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. And of course, that we all know will really improve their deep sleep. They'll be able to sleep better. So all the things that we were doing to just tighten up their glucose levels, they were also helping them sleep. But, oh my gosh, poor sleep just trashes your blood sugar.
Yeah, I mean, we have members that, myself included, I've definitely seen it, where it's like I am having the spikes all night, or like if I eat, something too close to my bedtime, and then like my readings are elevated all night. And then the next morning, okay, let me reach for that cup of coffee, running on caffeine all day. And it's kind of like that
rinse
cycle. Rinse and repeat, So what would be you mentioned eating dinner earlier. And, we want that cortisol level to be lower at night, melatonin to come out. We can really get into good quality sleep. But what would you say as far as like some major tips for, having lower variability in your glucose overnight or during the day? Like, what are the main sleep tips that you recommend?
The main sleep tips. Well, one is don't eat 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. It is, I'm just going to say this as a layperson. It is like your liver set at 8 or 9 o'clock, just clocks out and says, I know there's work piling up, but I'm going home and I'll be back at 6 a.m. and I'll deal with all this then. Because you can get your blood sugar levels up, and for many of us, they just stay up all night until the liver just comes back on and the day shift comes back and says, okay, I'm here. I'll deal with all that. We don't have the glucose tolerance at nighttime that we do during the daytime. So we've got to pull that back. That is my number one strategy for improving sleep, for sure.
I'll add to that. One of the things that we've seen in our data that kind of tricks people is when they have some alcohol with their dinner, that it actually causes a delay in the spike. So you might back up a few hours, but if you have maybe a couple glasses of wine or a cocktail with your meal, that spike from that meal might be delayed by 2-3 hours. Sometimes we've seen even longer.
Yeah.
So abstaining from the alcohol, I don't know if I want to encourage day drinking, but have that drink with lunch maybe.
When should I drink? I said lunch.
No morning.
Yes,
You said
lunch.
or happy hour.
So you've seen the same
earlier-
with your clients in terms of
yeah.
alcohol? Yeah.
I will call it like we can talk about this later, but I'll flag sleep apnea. This is a place where we actually flag sleep disorders because we're like, your food is fine. How are you sleeping? You need to get a sleep test. Comes back, obstructive sleep apnea. They had no idea. But definitely, with the alcohol, what I see is I see a dip. I see hypoglycemia with alcohol. And because we know alcohol, and I'm not against alcohol, I just told you what I was going to have for my dinner party tonight.
Right.
But alcohol is a toxin that your liver needs to deal with. And in lay terms, the liver isn't going to do anything, can't deal with your blood sugar until it deals with the alcohol. It's like, okay, you guys all have to wait because like you're at a restaurant, you're like, I can't do anything until we get rid of the rats. The rats have to go. Everyone else is not going to eat till the rats are out of the restaurant. And so the liver just has to get the alcohol out of the system and then it can deal with it. And so, yeah, what you see is either delayed spike, but then you get this hypoglycemia around 2 or 3 that wakes people up kind of hot and sweaty. And it's not usually a clinical hypoglycemia. It's not below 70 necessarily, but it's a definite dip. And it's often where your liver it can't manage gluconeogenesis. It
actually shuts down gluconeogenesis, yes.
Yeah. So again, it's like, I'm sorry. There's rats. We can't work under these conditions.
Yes. And for our listeners who haven't heard some of our previous episodes, gluconeogenesis is the liver's ability to take glycogen stores. A lot of your sugar is actually stored in the form of glycogen. Your liver can take that and convert it into glucose and send it into your bloodstream to fuel. That gets shut down oftentimes when you're drinking alcohol, which could cause a dip like you've seen with your clients.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears a bit. I want to talk about 2 popular things I know amongst our Signos staff and members that they've found has really helped with their blood sugar, and that's berberine and ACV, apple cider vinegar. So have you seen any effects with berberine, positive effects with your client base?
Yes.
I've got a big question on this, but just tell me a little bit about what you've seen.
So before I was using it deliberately for blood sugar, I noticed it in a client who, she came to me like many people, and she had blood sugar issues and she had digestive issues. I put her on a CGM. We did a stool test. We're like, oh, she's got some overgrowth in there, both some bacteria and fungal things. And so one of the antimicrobials that we used for her that was helpful was a high product high in berberine. And she alternated that with something else. And when she was using that berberine product, her blood sugar was basically all shifted about 20 points or more down. She had great blood sugar control. I'm not doing anything different. My blood sugar is so much better. And I was like, oh, it's the berberine. And as soon as she stopped taking it, a little bit later, about a week later, it popped back up. So we definitely see berberine improving things. And I think in the literature, and then since that I've recommended some people try it when the diet wasn't working or they just weren't able to adhere to the diet. They wanted to try something more natural before they went to, say, metformin. And I see berberine having a very similar effect as metformin in terms of the degree with which it lowers blood sugar.
That's fascinating. We've seen the same thing in experiments that we've done internally. Here's my question, though, is there seems to be 2 camps on dosage and when to dose with berberine. There are those that say you should take it about 20 minutes prior to a meal, and then others that say that you should take it either like morning, evening, or both, but when you wake up and when you go to sleep. So I'm curious as to what your suggestions are with your
I have only
client base.
dosed it like morning and evening. I haven't dosed it with meals at all. It doesn't require dosing with the meal to have its effect.
That's, I think that explains a lot. That's what I do, but I think a lot of people get turned off from berberine because they try it just for a few days by having it right before a meal. Then they say it doesn't work. But I think if you start taking it regularly, you might see a different effect. Of course, everyone's different, but yeah, I think maybe if you're not seeing an effect taking it prior to meals, then maybe try it like morning, evening, and see if that helps.
Yeah.
Apple cider vinegar also has been a huge. We've seen a huge response in our own staff experiments.
Can I back up to berberine?
Oh yeah,
once more?
I am sorry. I just left berberine too
That's all
early.
right. Yeah,
that's okay.
There's
yeah,
a caution
absolutely.
with berberine.
There is.
There is, and I should have pulled it up. There was a study not too long ago that came out too. Well, berberine is an antimicrobial. It's a potent antimicrobial. It kills bacteria and fungal species in your gut very effectively. You can use berberine with people with SIBO. It kills. And you know what? You're always thinking, well, it only kills the bad guys. It doesn't only kill the bad guys. It kills a lot. And the study that I wish I had this on the tip of my tongue or pulled up, but there's a study that showed it actually does reduce the beneficial microbes in the gut as well, even if you're taking some probiotics along with it. So long-term use, so you need to take that into account when you're dosing with berberine and deciding, is the risk-benefit profile appropriate for you? Is it, with my clients who need to do that anyways, it's the perfect choice. I'm like, yeah, let's just use berberine for a couple of months and kill two birds with one stone. But I want to watch out for it really changing the microbiome in a negative way by using it long term.
I did not know that, and that is a fascinating insight. If you get that study, please email it to us. We'll put it in the show notes so people can read up on it. But yeah, that is a great thing to point out. On to ACV. I can hear Karen actually sending the link right now as we're talking, which is awesome.
On top of it.
She is so on top of it. So ACV, apple cider vinegar, is another thing that we've tried internally that seems to work. Have you had similar success with apple cider vinegar? And if so, can you tell us about it?
Yeah. I think the literature on apple cider vinegar says the mechanism by which it helps is that it delays gastric emptying a bit. Much like protein, fat, and so yes, you can take a shot of apple cider vinegar. It helps delay gastric emptying, improves your blood sugar response to that meal that you're having afterwards. Yes. And when I'm working with people, I will often, I put that in the list of helpful things to do, but I tend to, rather than thinking of it as I'm going to take my shot of apple cider vinegar before my meal, I will say, so, that salad, have that salad at the beginning of your meal. And the studies that I looked at, it wasn't necessarily apple cider vinegar. They were dosing because they were doing placebo trials. They dosed with acetic acid. So it wasn't necessarily apple cider vinegar. It would be any acetic acid. So any vinegar, because acetic acid is the chemical that's vinegar. So in my mind, it wouldn't necessarily have to be apple cider vinegar. It could be white vinegar, champagne vinegar, balsamic vinegar, red wine vinegar. So I generally lump it in together in a culinary perspective of, if you're having that, the steak, salad, and baked potato dinner, have the steak and or salad first. So you get that dose of vinegar and the fiber, polyphenols, protein. But some people don't mind taking a shot of apple cider vinegar before their meals. And if they don't, then great. That can
I prefer to put it in a dressing, put it on a salad.
I love that too, because I'll use the vegan version of this saying, it feeds two birds with one scone, in that, sorry. I should have saved that until you're finished with your water. But it's getting people to eat their greens, their dark leafy greens as well before the meal. And we know from there was 2 Cornell studies when people ate dark greens first before going to carbs, it did affect glycemic response. So it's those 2. I'm one who does not like to take that shot.
Me neither.
Ew. Yeah, so it's great to know that it's not limited to that. It's the acid component that's probably helping. I have my own warning with ACV, and that is if you're going to take that shot, you might want to use a straw because it can erode your tooth enamel.
Yes.
Yes, and there's one other thing I was thinking of. I can't remember. Oh, it's also you can do other things other than the dressing. Another really neat idea we tested was an apple cider vinegar cocktail or mocktail, just using carbonated water, some ACV, some lime juice, some ginger, is actually pretty helpful in offsetting that sour acid note. That's might be something you enjoy, a mocktail before your meal.
Let's go one further.
Okay.
Let's add some aromatic bitters to that to improve digestion, because those bitters will stimulate motility, stomach acid, bile secretion, enzyme, and now we've got a perfect aperitif.
Wow, I feel a cocktail show coming on. Where, Karen, we're definitely going to have you back, and we're going to actually, I think the 3 of us are going to make those cocktails and each have our own variation.
Body
Yes.
Signals happy hour.
It's always happy hour on Body Signals, is what I like to say.
We have a lot of people saying, okay, well, I'm eating like perfectly balanced meals and, I'm getting all my vegetables in and eating those first. And they're still seeing, higher variability or higher readings. And this is where I always recommend for our members to log in the Signos app and use the notes section. Write down like last night, my daughter was up at 9. I had poor sleep. I could see it in the Signos app, but also that's important for me to note and look back on, saying like, all right, this is what's going on. Like maybe I have a stressful meeting or have to run out and take the kids somewhere. I had poor sleep. Like these are important things because we tend to, and I probably have said this so many times, that we tend to always focus on the food, but there's so many other aspects like stress that have such a huge impact on our glucose.
Right. And the solutions are so unsexy. They're so unsexy, but they make a big difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, your ears aren't fooling you. I think we had a special guest join, a rooster in the background. I don't know if that's coming from Alyssa or from you, Karen, but I could
That's
hear
me.
that.
I have 2 of them, and they are currently on my front porch.
That's...
I didn't want you though. I'm like,
No, it was in Studio City in Los Angeles. Come on.
Yeah.
I love that. That added a special ambiance to our recording. So thank you for that, and please thank them. We have time for one last little short topic, and that's polyphenols. So you didn't say what time we were invited tonight for the fondue dinner, but we're expecting some wine, which contains polyphenols. I'm curious to know the connection that you draw between polyphenols and glucose.
Oh, yeah. So, for listeners who don't know, these polyphenols are these big compounds that often are pigments in our food. And they're things like resveratrol, curcumin, quercetin. Those are types of polyphenols. And these really fall into the food as medicine category. And what's interesting about these is sometimes they're antioxidants. They can reduce oxidative stress. So similar to the way some of these adaptogens are acting. But I was just reading, there's a recent study, but there's a bulk of them that have looked at one category of polyphenols called anthocyanins. And anthocyanins are, they're usually the purple and blue. You're thinking blueberries, bilberries, but they can be red, pink, purple. So bilberries, chokecherries, elderberries, cranberries, raspberries, purple cabbage, radicchio. These are where you're going to get your the anthocyanins. And these studies have shown that if you pre-dose, so some of these blind studies, they pre-dose with a pill that had these purple anthocyanins, and it reduced the glucose spike. It reduced the glucose spike in that meal when you took them before. And other studies done around that show that they have been able to reproduce that. They lower blood glucose, they lower lipids when you include them in your diet. One study, just with strawberries, they gave a drink, and I don't know, they double blinded this. They must have used like a strawberry flavoring in one of them, but one with strawberries in it attenuated the postprandial inflammatory response. So this is really key, because eating is an inflammatory situation. We almost always, when we eat, that's my timer, almost always when we eat, we have a bump in our inflammation levels. Some meals do this more than others. And this is, when I say inflammation, if you're measuring high sensitivity C-reactive protein, IL-6 or TNF-alpha after meals. When you use the strawberry drink before meals, it reduced those inflammatory markers after a meal. So now we're seeing the link between inflammation and blood sugar, oxidative stress, and all those things. So when we think back to the polyphenols that we know, like resveratrol, curcumin, quercetin, we know they impact inflammation. We know they impact the immune system because that's what we use them for. Curcumin, the active ingredient in turmeric, is such a popular supplement for lowering inflammation. So you've got this really interesting connection between inflammation, blood sugar, insulin resistance, and simply adding colorful foods to your meals can do this. So, I must be in the wrong profession because I hate taking food away from people. I really try to find things to add to the diet. And if I can tell someone, hey, eat some blueberries, throw some purple cabbage, like coleslaw, let's eat more coleslaw, throw a bunch of purple cabbage in your coleslaw, add some radicchio to your salad. What a wonderful way to add polyphenols along with your vinegar in your salad to help mitigate that glucose spike, lower inflammation after your meal. It's a great food as medicine approach.
And it goes along with a common saying we have on our show, which is eat the rainbow. If you do that, if you just make your plate as colorful as possible, including all of these things, you're probably going to get your polyphenols. Have a glass of red wine, maybe some chocolate at lunch with the red wine. These are such amazing suggestions. Karen, thank you so much for joining us on Body Signals. If our listeners want to find you, where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, my website, realfood-matters.net.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for joining. Alyssa, thank you for co-hosting. You're always an excellent co-host. So
yeah.
Until our next episode, thanks, everybody.
Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and tap the bell icon to be the first to get more videos like this one, and stay connected with the Signals.